Dave, how did you find carnivore?
Thanks very much for having me on. Thanks for everything you do for the community. How did I find carnivore? It wasn't through YouTube, right? It was through a friend of mine. So I I'd like to approach this kind of going back. I had zero expectations for carnivore when I started. I didn't really know much about it. I knew that I might be able to lose a bit of weight, and as much as anything, I was doing it to support. It wasn't even to support so much. It support a friend of mine who had had a stroke and had gone on the carnivore diet after doing quite a lot of research on it. And the only thing I'd really heard about it, and the only advice I gave him, which now I realise isn't good advice necessarily, was, well, I think if you do it, you've really got to do it. Don't mix it with carbs because then it can be really damaging. I don't know where I picked that up, but I've since come to know that a lot of people do better if they graduate into the diet. So I'm going to go back I'll say a bit about what it was like in my life prior, what I did, and then what it's like now. Because I've been so I'm about 95% carnivore. I'm ketovore. I'll still have things like avocados, and yeah, I have a bit of dairy, and I make my own kefir and things like that. So I can't say I'm 100% carnivore, although I'm more carnivore now than I've ever been. In the time that I've been doing it, I've been getting more carnivore rather than less carnivore. So it went from ketovore to sort of 80% meat to now up to about 95, I'd say. When I left home and went to university in Edinburgh, I didn't realise, but I think my diet just turned to rubbish. It was just fast food. I didn't really know how to cook. I'd had it all done for me by my mother, who's a good cook and cooked well for us. And the first kind of warning signs I had, putting them all together now, I'd gone to a doctor about something at university. I don't even know what year, maybe third year or something. And they said, "Oh, your blood pressure's quite high." Which, I mean, I was 20 years old, right? And I was high blood pressure. So that was like, okay. Didn't really think much about that for a few years. Towards the end of my university stint, I started getting clinically significant anxiety and depression. And by the time I did a postgraduate course, and then by the time I was working, within a year, I was rocking up to doctors with sweat in my hands and just I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that this was anxiety and depression. I didn't know what I didn't know. It wasn't that I was going there looking for an antidepressant or anything. I just didn't know what was wrong with me. I was headaches. I was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he said, "Look, you've got this depression, and I'm going to stick you on a pill," which he did. I will mention the medication. It was a thing called venlafaxine, which is quite a powerful medication to stick somebody on first thing, and it sort of worked amazingly well in that the depression went away, the anxiety went away, and I stopped caring about anything. Probably started drinking too much, and my focus went as well. It had all these side effects that it did what it said on the tin, but it also had a bunch of side effects. So
it's like a complete 180-degree turn.
Yeah, looking at it now, I probably went a little bit the other way. In fact, it kind of whether it's a hypomania or whatever, I was just on 110 miles an hour at that point, and I didn't want to be on these things for life. And so after about 8 months or so, I'd imagine, I came off them for the first time, and that started a cycle of coming off them. They're very, very difficult to come off, these particular pills, and they've got a short half-life, and I was kind of getting electric shocks in my head and all the quite nasty withdrawal symptoms. And at that point in time, this is 25 years ago now, nobody really talked about tapering these things. So I pretty much stopped and rattled through this withdrawal symptom. And what would happen is I'd get 3 months of being off medication, and then I'd kind of crash and get depressed again. And I was led to believe that I'd kind of this treatment-resistant depression and anxiety, and I was always going to have it, and I was probably always going to be on pills. And although I didn't stay with that pill, I've moved around a whole bunch of SSRI medications over the years and been on them for a couple of years. And I thought, I'll give it a try coming off, and I would come off, and 3 months later, boom. And this has been a cycle that has gone on for decades now. And along the way, other medical conditions started coming up, right? So that high blood pressure thing, by the time I was in my 30s, they were like, right, this isn't going away. Here you go. We're going to stick you on a pill. And by the time I was in my 40s, that wasn't one pill. That was 2 pills at the maximum dose for blood pressure. And it was, quote unquote, it was controlling my blood pressure. My blood pressure was normal, within the normal range, but on a shed load of these blood pressure medication pills. I'm kind of fast forwarding quite a few years here, but lockdown was a difficult time. I'd lost a friend just before it who took his own life, and that had a negative effect on my mental health at the time. I didn't really put 2 and 2 together, but I do now. And I'd gone back on an antidepressant, actually gone back on that first pill, this venlafaxine. And I'd just before that had happened, I'd split up with my wife, and it was just a really bad time. Then lockdown happened, and I was kind of alone in a flat in Paisley, and very little connection, and I was just eating rubbish. It was takeout food, and I'd sort of given up a bit. Just before that happened, it was the first time I'd heard about Ketovore. My business partner at the time, he's now actually a fitness instructor, but we were computer programmers at the time, making websites, and he'd gone keto because although he was very fit, he was just having a bit of trouble losing that bit of belly fat at the bottom, and it was the last thing he wanted to do. So, and it just seemed so complicated to me. We spent a bit of time doing up a house, and he would pick out, and he would show me the number of nuts he was allowed. And hats off to him. I thought, wow, you're really organised, you prepare your meals, you know exactly what you're eating, but no way I would do that. It was just too much work. Anyway, lockdown happened. I probably did myself quite a damage, really, one way or another. And by the end of it, I'd come out and I had a bunch of things wrong with my stomach. I had a hernia in my belly button and a hernia further up as well. And I was put on omeprazole, which was really to be a lifelong pill. So now I'm on 3 lifelong medications, right? And kind of getting up in the morning, taking two blood pressure pills, an antidepressant, and a thing for my stomach. And I'm not overthinking it, but knowing it's not great, it's I'll be 50 this year. I'll be 50 in a month, and I'm on these 3 medications. And so I made some life changes after lockdown. Moved out to where I live now in North Ayrshire, and got a collie dog and started walking, right? So I'm being healthier and kind of walking and cycling and things, but it's not really having any effect on the blood pressure. And then about 18 months ago, no, it won't. About 18 months ago, a friend of mine from school. Now, we had known each other since primary school, since primary two, uh, really good friends, like our best friends for a long time, and we'd lost touch. Anyway, he got back in touch with me. He'd found my phone number or something, and I just got this phone call out of the blue. And we just started talking and hit it off again really quickly. It'd been 10, 12 years since we'd spoken to each other. And it turned out that my friend Dan, he doesn't mind me using his name, he'd had a stroke. And so it affected this kind of speech center of his brain, and so he'd become a bit kind of stuttery. So he was apologising for that, and it's not really anything to apologise about. It's probably something he notices more himself than. But he had also had other issues after the stroke, where it'd been a big blow to the system, and it knocked his confidence, and he was trying to find meaning in life and all the rest of it. And it was really good. So it turned out that we weren't very far away from each other. We arranged to meet up and spent an afternoon just shooting the breeze and catching up, and that was great. And we sort of kept in touch. And about 6 months later than that, we was on the phone, we're just chatting, and he said, I've been thinking about trying this carnivore diet. And I thought, right, I don't know much about it, except my business partner had done keto. And so I told him about that the little bit of experience that I had, and I told him that all I do know is, or I think I know, is you shouldn't mix and match. It's not one that you can have a lot of. If you're not going to have carbs, really don't have carbs. Stick to their limit, right? And he actually took that advice, and I think went through the keto flu and all the things you go through at the beginning. I don't think it was too bad a time, and very quickly determined that this was for him, and it was making huge differences in his life. And I was kind of I was going along with it, and you know what I was thinking at the time was it could be placebo, and it doesn't matter as long as he's getting something from it, and he's thinking there's this improvement. Brilliant, and I'll support that. But he's sort of going, you should do this. You should do this. And I'm like, oh, right. And I sort of did, and then I didn't, and I did, and I dipped in and out, but never really did it seriously. And at the beginning of this year, I said, right, okay, I'm going to do Ketovore, and I'm going to do it for a month, just to maybe a bit to humour him, and also because. And I went keto, and I didn't take the electrolytes. I probably wasn't drinking enough water, and in the first week, very quickly, I had quite a keto flu. Right, it hit me. It hit me quite hard, but it meant something was happening, and it was good because I was also being supported by Dan, and he was saying, look, have more salt at the moment. And I'm like, but I've got high blood pressure. And he's like, look, I know it'll go up for a bit, but just have more salt. It'll balance your electrolytes while you're going through this. I thought, okay, in for the penny, in for the pound. And I did that. And after about 7 days, I was sort of back to normal. And I could see I'd lost sort of water weight straight away. The water weight seemed to just drop off me. So I'd gone into this with zero expectations, sort of doing it for someone else's, and then I started on the YouTube thing, and I found yourself, I found Dr. Chafee, Dr. Berry, all the usual suspects. I'm not going to say it's a rabbit hole, because a rabbit hole sounds like something you go down, you can't turn back. I think we're on a different path. I think we're going going in a direction, and once you're on it and you realize the benefits, you don't want to go back, right? It's not you're stuck in this. So I bought myself from Amazon some of these little stick things, little paper sticks that you pee on, and they tell you if you're in ketosis or not, right? And just out of curiosity, and they were bright red. I was super in ketosis, much more in ketosis at the beginning than I seem to be now. But I think that's because maybe I'm using my ketones. I wasn't fat adapted in any way at that point. And my experience at first, after the keto flu, was I got an amazing burst of focus and energy. In a way, I'm kind of glad that subsided. I was doing 16, 18-hour days at work. I was really focused. It was great. Just doing all the things I would normally do and half again. But the first thing I noticed, the first sort of surprise I got along the way, is I wake up in the morning, and for 25 years I wake up in the morning and I'm lucky if it's a mild anxiety, and mostly it's just a kind of mild anxiety, and I'd rather not get out of bed. That had changed from an anxiety to kind of an excitement about the day, like what I'm going to get going, so it was sort of the same energy feeling as the anxiety, but it changed from a negative to a positive. And then I thought I better keep an eye on my blood pressure here, because I don't know what it's doing. And it was way too low. So I phoned the doctor and said, look, I'm doing this. I just said a ketovore diet, which it was at the time. And my blood pressure is coming right down. And he said, well, reduce your medication, keep an eye on it. So I did, and it turned out like one of the two medications I just completely came off. And then the other medication, I now have a quarter size of the dose that I had when I was on it. So, and I don't need it, probably, and my blood pressure it's still good. It's still totally normal range now, and I probably don't need that little dose. And anyway, whether that's a security blanket and just to keep the prescription going, I'm just doing it at the moment. So blood pressure came right down, and I started thinking, oh, okay, that is really, really surprising. And I was not depressed. I didn't have any of these symptoms, and I thought, right, I'm going to start weaning off the antidepressant meds that I was on. So after a month, I just started reducing the dose. An old hand at this now. You don't come off them; you just down slowly. And so I started. Let's say the dose was 150, and every week I was dropping it by 25 milligrams and stabilizing, dropping by 25 milligrams. If there were any kind of negative side effects, I would have slowed up on that and just going with my body. And again, so I'm now on a dose of 25 milligrams, which I've been on so it's gone from 150 to 25, which is a sub-therapeutic dose. And the only reason I'm doing the 25 is I can't believe it's this simple, right? I should just come off the 25 completely and intend to do that. But it's just, keep the prescription going because it's such a hassle kind of going. Anyway, it's the next thing to go. I'm on a sub-therapeutic dose of this. It wouldn't have any effect on my mental health anyway at this dose, so I should just come off it. And I don't have any symptoms. Now this is 6 months in. This is like longer than I usually would ever get without the kind of rebound anxiety, depression, and I'm okay. Bless you. And so somewhere along the line there, I thought, I wonder if I need this omeprazole for my stomach. stuff anymore, because I was getting reflux going into my esophagus, and I felt like I had a blockage when I was swallowing things. So I thought, okay, I'll reduce that, and I just reduced that over a week, and I don't need it with this diet. So I'm off that. I'm basically off the blood pressure and antidepressant medication as well. None of this was expected. I didn't have any preconceptions about carnivore, apart from what Dan had said. So it wasn't like, I can't even blame this on maybe being a placebo effect, because I really, really didn't think this was a thing. And through the period from starting off keto, I've started doing various things, like I make my own kefir, about to start making my own yogurt. So these things are in because is it Mary Riddick? I think a good healthy gut bacteria. I still would like to keep that going, but I've changed my diet from lots of chicken and things to almost, it's not rump steaks, it's ribeye steaks for the most part. That's my favorite. If I'm going to have a meal, I have lots of eggs, and I have I have water to drink, fizzy water. Still do a little bit of coffee in the morning, but yeah. So
You're shaking your head as you're saying that, almost like even though you're saying what's happened, you still can't believe it's been this easy.
Well, it's not. It's not that it's been easy. We have challenges, right? This is why your show is successful, and because everybody else thinks we're bonkers. Like if I go out for a meal and I'm just asking for the meat portion of the meal, and they can't. In Ayrshire, where I am, they can't just bring you a steak. The chef won't let it leave the steak with a bit of steak. It has to have accoutrements. So and the best reaction you can kind of get from friends or acquaintances is a kind of nodding and like, yeah, but you've obviously lost the plot. So and the worst is, oh, you're doomed. I hadn't realised, right? I've had various addictions, right? I'm quite an addictive personality, and usually they're bloody obvious, like smoking or drinking alcohol. These things are elephants in the room. I didn't realise I was addicted to sugar. I didn't realise I was addicted to carbs. The keto flu, that coming off it a bit for me, I maybe did it a bit faster. It was withdrawal. It was a withdrawal symptom, and it's the body changing over to ketones. I now view sugar, especially, as a drug, and I don't think I'm a million miles off in that. I think there are medical people that would probably back that up, and a poisonous one at that. So I have to remember to be grateful on a daily basis, right? Because it's easy for this just to become the new normal, and I can forget what it is. That's why your channel's great, and that's why it's good to tune into these YouTube things. It's great to have my friend Dan, who's on the same journey, and we can phone up and talk about this, and just remind myself where I was 6 months ago. And it was something that I was going to do for a month, and now I've every intention, unless something comes along that absolutely says I can't do this, and I can't imagine what that would be. I don't want to go back. I've lost 2.5 stone, weight stabilized now. I'm fitter. I'm happier. I have more energy. I spend less money on this diet. So even though you're buying nice cuts of meat from a butcher's, uh, it's just all the rubbish is gone. I'm trying to. I've got two. I've got a 12-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old daughter who stay at weekends, and um, I've really noticed how addicted to sugar. And you think, oh, it's kids, but it's kids starting off wrong. And I'm trying. I'm not lead by example is not the right. I'm trying to be an example in my eating for them, and I'm trying to suggest that maybe they want to think about reducing sugar. And for the most part, the weekends when they're here, they're doing that. But it's so easy. It's so easy now. I mean, I suppose it was in our day as well, but they can come back with like blue things, blue sweeties. I'm always suspicious of blue sweeties, and it's not that methylene blue either. It's some sort of horrible blue chemical, and it just looks so unhealthy. It's like, why would you put that in your body?
Right?
And,
When the thing you're eating looks like the color of this wall, it's not a good sign, right?
exactly right. Anything blue is so. One of them would happily go carnivore. One of them's a very picky eater, so it makes it more difficult. One of them would live. The picky eater would live on chicken nuggets and chips if she could get away with it. And chicken nuggets are, I don't want to get sued, but they're not the best meat. So this weekend when they were here, I said, okay, I'll give you chicken nuggets, but we'll make them. You and I we'll sit down, we'll make them from scratch, and we got chicken, we sliced it up, and we put goose fat on it and made it really nice. And so that she was involved in the process of eating it. And there were no chips. Just don't. If they're at mine, I just give them what I give them. And my other one, we had lamb chop, and just the lamb chops, and she loved that. And then we had a fillet and a ribeye, half each, for our other meal, and she loves that as well. So for a 10-year-old, that's quite good eating, because usually they're a bit more
That's
picky.
that's awesome.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm hoping they'll maybe go in that direction. But I'm not laying down the law or anything like that.
You've had these good results in such a short time. I mean, the medications is such a big thing, especially like the the reflux medication. I mean, that's awful for you long term. That's just it's
All
so
these
good
things are
to get off
awful.
that.
The there are benefits that I've experienced that I'm reticent to share on the channel, right? But that are affected by blood pressure medication and antidepressants. There are kind of, and whether it's the carnivore that affected this or coming off the meds, it's just been an altogether. It feels like I've had an injection of life. That I just need to stop. I just actually stop the tiny dose of certainly the antidepressant, and I'll play the blood pressure one by ear. And it's really simply just a habit at this point, where it's just a tiny little dose that I'm taking, and
Right.
is it fear? I don't know. Anyway, it just needs to stop.
On the injection of life part, um, has it continued as far as when you wake up, you're feeling like, I want to get out of bed. I want to take on the day.
I don't have anxiety in the morning anymore. So it's not that I'm awake. That happened for about 6 weeks, where it was almost like I was slightly high, elevated. It was like as I was moving on to ketones. Um, it, nobody should be working that amount. Nobody should be living that sort of life. So it's come back down to a happy medium. I get out to bed and I don't have an anxiety. I look, I'm not dreading the day ahead, but it's a level now. So, yeah, that bouncing out of bed in the morning thing and zoomy, 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 I think is a thing that I've heard happen to other people as well. But it does level down, and it was like the weight loss. Weight loss was crazy at first, and now that's leveled as well. I've probably got to my weight. I've got rid of belly fat that I just thought. I mean, I've had it. I've never been overweight. I've never looked overweight, but there was 2.5 stone on me that needed to go, right? And I got one of these fancy scales that measures or tells you it measures visceral fat and body fat percentage and all the rest of it, and all the number. And it's probably not accurate, but it'll be accurate for you, for, you know, over time. I mean, and all those numbers are going in the right direction as well. Visceral fat has come down, which is the big one. Um, yeah, I found it hard with, like, my mother. My mother has had I think called multiple myeloma, and it's a type of bone blood cancer, and she's in remission from that at the moment after going through chemo. And um, I don't want to give anybody medical advice, especially, but the kind of medical advice she was getting during her treatment, for instance, just now seems kind of sketchy, where it's like she asked about diet and they said just anything. Well, and I can understand why you're going through chemo, just eat anything you can stomach. But afterwards, she's asked about, moving on to a keto carnivore diet, and they're like, oh, no, 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 not carnivore, ketovore. She wouldn't go carnivore. Um, that seemed to be the impression, and um, I'm not anti-doctor. I'm not anti the medical profession. I just think a lot of times they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, I
So,
think it becomes very much like, well, we've got the medication works, this is the process, and outside of that, it's like, well, this is just kind of the sideshow. We need to
yeah,
focus on the main event, right?
well, yeah, and I was a lifer on these medications, and I don't. There's every chance now that I don't need any of them. And if you told me that 6 months ago, I just wouldn't have believed you. I thought these things I was on, these things I needed, because coming off them, um, I was going back into this refractory depression. I was going, my blood pressure would go sky high. I don't think I have a body that, whether any human being does, I don't know, but I don't have a body that handles carbohydrates particularly well. It seems that it may have been responsible. Sugar seems to be the thing that has kicked up my blood pressure from a young age. I was addicted to Coca-Cola. It was the thing I would drink, full fat Coke all the time. Um, the thought of that now is like, ugh,
Yeah,
sticky.
it sounds very similar to me. It's like my body, it loves the carbohydrates, but it just can't handle them.
It's it really, looking back on it now, it's hard to not believe it's an addiction, right? Just because it's a food stuff and you're doing it every day and everybody else is doing it. For me personally, something that's bad for me, something that I do habitually without thinking about, something that I do to feel better, something.
Yeah, I think it's an insidious kind of addiction, right? Because when it comes to something like alcohol or even probably hard drugs, they're limiting to a degree, right? Because like, if you take alcohol, at some point you're going to be lying under the table, right? And you can't drink anymore at that point. But you
Yeah.
can never not eat that next Pringle, you know?
Oh, Pringles especially, yeah. Uh, but yeah, it's also with these other things. Like if you're drinking too much alcohol, unless you're, and a lot of people are, sadly, in denial about their drinking habits, but it becomes a real elephant in the room. I'd stopped drinking a number of years ago, and I thought I had a real hope that that no longer taking any alcohol at all would have a really, really beneficial effect on my mental health. And to an extent, it did, but not as much. This is what's crazy, right? That this alcohol's an awful substance, right? I don't approve. It's not for me. Um, but I've had more benefit to my mental health through stopping carbohydrates and sugar than stopping alcohol. Actually, I say that with caveats. Um, I was better after stopping alcohol. Mental health was better, but it wasn't cured. It didn't fix it. It wasn't what I hoped it would be. Now it's what I hoped it would be. And that's extraordinary because I wasn't expecting it.
You talked about the kind of foods you're eating, but like, how often are you eating throughout the day? Is it like twice?
Yeah, so it's my normal day, sort of during a weekday when I'm working, is I'll have eggs in the morning, either 4 eggs or I'll have eggs and bacon, and then I don't eat through the day, but I'll have for lunch. I'll actually have my homemade kefir, uh, and then in the evening it will be a steak, and sometimes for lunch I will have, instead of the kefir, I'll have an avocado with salt on it. So that's I realise that's not carnivore, but I've never officially gone carnivore, although I'm more and more, as I say. I believe that the fats in avocados it's quite a good fat to have, and this has been the surprising thing for me is it's quite difficult. Now, I was getting fillet steaks at first. I really like a fillet steak, uh, but I actually needed to start. And it was Dan again who said he's been a real help. I need to start upping my fat. So my coffee now, I don't have milk in it. I'll have butter in it, which was, I was, the thought of doing that was, oh gosh, no. And then I did it, and it turns out to be really nice, right? So I'm like, whoa, bonus, right? So yeah, I've lots of butter. I cook with ghee. I cook with goose fat sometimes. There's been a recent one, tallow. So everything's moved over. No seed oils at all, and no processed food. I mean, even if you do that to your diet, even if you take out the processed food and the seed oils from your diet, that makes a difference. But I don't think it's made all the difference. I think there's whether it's inflammation of the brain, inflammation of the body, and this is a very non-inflammatory diet. It's it's just been so hugely beneficial. I'm so thankful to the community, and that Dan just persistently do it. I want somebody to talk to about it, right?
I
And I can understand now why that is.
Yeah. I think just picking up on something you said there, one of the scariest things when you get into your 40s, your 50s, or your 60s, and you discover carnivore, and you've been on it for 6 months, 1 year, something like that, and you realize I was causing that inflammation nonstop. I was like, it's like you've beaten up your body and then you're just constantly punching it to keep it down, you know? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, one of your guests yesterday, doctors at My Hill, anyway, she was talking. We can repair, and it's good to hear that message. It's good to hear them. It's good for smokers to know that you stop smoking 10 years down the line. Your body can fix itself. Do the right things, and the right things will happen. So that's a good message to hear, and it's a good message to hear. It's good to be reminded in these channels that people are getting benefits. And it's not going carnivore. It's not a life sentence, right? It's actually, it becomes the thought of. I'll give you an example. At the weekend, I had the thought of sweet things now turns me right off. I made pork for the girls, It's one of the few things my picky eating daughter will eat. And I had some Manuka honey from my sister's partner, who's from New Zealand. He has had it in my cupboard for ages. I thought, okay, roast pork, I'll put some honey on at the end and glaze it for them and make it a bit more. I was eating the sweet stuff from the top, and it just tastes too sweet now. I can't. The thought of putting sugar on things, it's. Ugh. I will occasionally have a berry. I occasionally have raspberries, sort of the low glycemic index berries, and they're so sweet. I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, it's nice, but I mean, compared with, I used to have raspberries with cream. I mean, you still have cream, but and it needed to be coated in sugar as well in every point because it just wasn't enough. And then the other thing that it was hard to get my head round is that fat doesn't make you fat. And we've been told this. There used to be an advert. I was talking to my mum about this the other day. An advert on British TV in the late 80s or 90s, and it was for some. I can't remember what it was for. Some dieting or slimming product. And it used to be, can you pinch an inch? And you look down the street now. There's nobody that can't pinch at least an inch. And and we followed this advice of. Calories in, calories out, more exercise, and this is the way you balance your weight. It's a really difficult way to do it, though, isn't it? Really, you can eat as much fat and as much protein as you like. You don't have to be hungry. These things fat will not make you fat. Animal fat won't make you fat, or won't make me fat. I'm not a medical person, but this is my understanding of what I've been reading. The only thing I am going to do, 6 months ago, I had a full set of bloods done for something completely different. And at the end of next week, I've got a doctor's appointment. I'm going to ask to have my bloods done again. I'm aware that things are going to have shifted, and I'll read up on what more carnivore levels should be. I'm aware that cholesterol may be higher, but that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. It's going to be the ratios of these compared with triglycerides, etc. So I'm really curious. I have no idea what my blood results were before. UK doctors don't want to tell you, and if they can get away with it, they'll just go, "Yeah, you don't need a statin yet. You're not diabetic yet." But I can't be far off pre-diabetes.
Why are they so reluctant to say anything unless they've got bad news?
I've thought about this actually, and I think it's because it's not that they don't want more work. It's that they don't want to unnecessarily worry you, or maybe it's just like they don't want to. There's a lot in a blood. If you get your full blood, there's quite a lot of information there, and there are quite a lot of dynamics that might need to be explained in a 15-minute or 10-minute appointment, which is hard to kind of maybe get across. And if you're in about something completely different, then it's fix the problem as quickly as possible and leave on to the next person. So it's difficult in this country unless you have money. It's difficult in any country unless you have money to have a kind of holistic approach to medical care. You really have to take this stuff into your own hands, and that's quite a daunting task when there's so many things wrong. Like 6 months ago, I wouldn't have considered it. Now I'm fascinated by it. Now I'm fascinated about what's happening to me. It's like, and I try, and I've gone through the phase of trying to promote this diet to people, and I know it doesn't work. I don't have that skill. My friend, he does. He's been able to convert me and make other people go in that direction. So all I do now is, if they ask, I'll tell them, and it's just be an example. And if they notice differences in me, then that's great.
Yeah.
Because sort of putting, pardon the pun, stuffing it down people's throats don't work. People,
Right.
I have no idea. This is what also makes me think it's an addiction. Is is if you bring up somebody's diet or what they're eating, or suggest it might could change or be wrong, the defensiveness. It's like defending cigarettes or defending alcohol or defending. I'm fine. I eat a balanced diet. What's a balanced diet? Whatever you fancy, right? Everyone thinks they eat a balanced diet. It's so. Yeah, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I don't think I'm doing anybody any harm. I'm not ramming it down anybody's throat. But if they ask me, I will tell them.
So let's say a friend came to you and said, "Okay, well, I see what you're doing. It's obviously working. I want to try it myself." How would you recommend they start?
Um, First of all, I would say don't come to me for medical advice, but I would be here to support you, right? I have a mixed view about whether you do the. Actually, I did have a friend quite recently. He had done it a year ago, but he actually did it for Lent, and I'd said, well, I have a mixed feeling about whether you should wean off carbs and go on to high meat and high protein, high fat, or whether you should just stop carbs. I think it depends on the person. I think if you have an addictive nature, weaning off things is difficult. Um, if you've an addictive nature, maybe it's worth just putting a date in the diary and doing it, making sure you have electrolytes and you're getting enough salt, and read up on what's going to happen to you in the first week. And it's like that. There's a Give Up Smoking book by Alan Carr, and the big thing in that book is change your perception of what you're going through in withdrawal. That this isn't a withdrawal. This is you getting better. This feeling that you're going through is actually you getting better. So, okay, it might not feel pleasant, but it won't last long, and this is how to view it. I think people have vastly varying outcomes with the keto flu. For me, what really helped is these little keto sticks to actually see that something was going on. I know that's silly. I don't really do them now, but just to see that, okay, this is working. There's something going on in my body, and oh well, I'll stick with it a little bit longer. At least I'm not going through pain. This it's not nowhere near as bad as the flu, right? But it's kind of, for me, it was achy joints and difficulty sleeping and
I
stuff
think
like
I
that.
think you're right. Like having the keto sticks or the little bit of weight loss you notice, even if it's just water weight or something like that. Those are really important things, right? Because it's kind of like when you're waiting for something to happen on your computer and you're looking at the percent
Yeah,
going up and up and up and up and up. It's like, okay, well, it's doing something. If there's nothing, no message on the screen, you think, what's happened? I'm going to restart the computer.
for sure. And then it's like, well, I'm now 6 months in. Dan's over a year, and he's been through a lot of the stuff that because he sort of reached plateaus. Lots of things happen, and it feels like a plateau, and then more things will happen. He's gone through oxalate dumping, which I haven't gone through yet. Maybe that's because I still have an avocado every now and again and whatnot. But just to be aware of what's down the line. So your channel, it's worthwhile watching the kind of the usual suspects. That's another thing I would do. So if a friend came on, I would send them a few channels to watch. I'd say, look, these are good people. There are, and avoid dirty. If you're going to go keto, it's possible to go quite dirty keto. And what's the point in doing it in that case? If you're going to eat chicken nuggets, okay, you might technically be keto, but no, why? I would suggest if you're going to do it, commit to it and give it a good shot for a month. And after a month, maybe you'll be like me and won't want to go back. So
Yeah. I think, once you're 1 month in, it's like you kind of just the way you feel, and you notice such a vast difference. It's hard to go, "Yeah, I really like the ice cream," and it's worth putting up with all the aches and pains and everything else
Yeah,
for.
yeah. And that's the other thing. I used to feel a year, 8 months ago, let's say, I'd be speaking to Dan, and he would say, "Oh no, he's very good. He's very strict for the most part." But I think that there was one episode where a friend had come around and brought him a bunch of Greg's donuts and left them at the house. Right, and he'd had one of these Greg's donuts, and the next day he was feeling so unwell. And I kind of pitied him at the time that you shouldn't just have a can't just have a donut without whatever diet you're on, you don't feel well. But that's your body being used to being well, and that's a good sign that if you put this poison in your body now, your body says, "Hey, you know, just going to no do that." Um, and yeah, so I think these are positive things, and there are some things that you might think going through, like the keto flu or oxalate dumping, that you might think are negative things happening to you. So it's worth having the experience of some people who've gone before you to know that what you're going through is actually is normal, or is to be expected, and there are benefits further on. I'm looking
Mm,
forward to the benefits further on. The changes are definitely getting. Uh, there aren't so many so quickly, so that curve is leveling off now, but it's more becoming that this is normal, and this is how life is. So that's good,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
it wasn't that, it would be yeah, it'd be a trial, wouldn't it, if everything was changing all the time.
Thank you so much for coming on, Dave, and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.